Let's talk a little bit more about this presidential debate. It could have an impact on the states that are too close to call. In 2016, President Trump took North Carolina and Georgia on his way to winning the election. Our latest CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows that both states are in play this year. Georgia remains a toss-up, where the president is only up by 1 point. The state favored former Vice President Joe Biden by a point earlier this summer. But the Democratic presidential nominee is still holding a 2-point lead in North Carolina. He has a 4-point edge there earlier this summer. For more on all of this, CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto joins us now. Hey there, Anthony. The polls in these states are tight. Let's go ahead and start with Georgia. What does this race hinge on, and why are the polls so close?
Hey there, Alana. Well, let me take you into Georgia first, as you mentioned. When we look at Georgia and we look at why the polls are so close, you want to break the state down the way we do both in polling and the way we will on election night. And first, you look in and around the Atlanta metro area. This is a fast-growing region. It's got the kinds of voters that Joe Biden has been looking to swing: suburban women, college degree-holding women. That's been a big part of his gains. So all of that focus happens there in and around Atlanta. As you go further out from there, these red areas on the map in Georgia, they're more Republican, and they're kind of adding up to that narrow lead that you see for the president. But I also want to do this for you, Lana. I want to show you what is so important when you break down Georgia. Two big things. One is African-American voters and African-American turnout. Now, at the moment, in our polls, we've got that at 30% of the electorate. Now, we've got Joe Biden down by a point. If he were to be able to get that turnout up such that it, say, hypothetically moved to 33% of the electorate, I'm going to move that over there, you would see that he would go up statewide. But if there's slightly lower African-American turnout, and I'll push that down to 27% of the electorate, you see that the state starts to slip away from him, and now he's down by 3 points. Well, in the polls, how much of the electorate is African-American likely voters? That's determinative on how this falls out. And then on election day, that's another key thing to watch. Even those small shifts that I just described make a big difference in this race, and they tell a political story, too, about turnout, Lana.
Yeah, we have been saying it for months now that it's really going to all come down to turnout. So President Trump, as I mentioned, is up by a point now in Georgia. Biden had it by a point over in this summer. Is this a bad trend for the Democrats? And what does the president need to do to continue to build momentum there?
Okay, so two things. One is you're exactly right about the small swings. We've seen a small swing toward the president here in Georgia, also one in North Carolina, and in a few other states where we've been polling. Our overall national model, a slight shift back towards the president. Joe Biden still leads, but Joe Biden has not built and grown on that lead that he has had and established over the summer. That's something to watch. Part of it has to do with it in all these states the president is seen as better on the economy. And I want to take you back inside the polling for 1 second and look at white voters. I'll use Georgia again as an example. When we break down the demographics, here you see the president winning a very large share, as Republicans typically do, 66% of white voters. So what does Joe Biden need to do to try to flip that state back? Well, he's got to cut into that margin a little bit. If he can hold the president to, say, 63%, which still feels like a big, giant number, but just that difference in the shift would, in this hypothetical example, put Joe Biden back over the top. And then conversely, if the president were to go back and even build more on that demographic, within that demographic, and get up to, say, 69%, then the president gets more comfortably ahead and gets back towards the margins that we saw for him in 2016. Small shifts among key demographic groups. That's the whole story here, Alana. And that's one example of what the president needs to do going forward.
All right, well, let's move on now to North Carolina. I'm wondering if it's the same in North Carolina as you're seeing in Georgia, or if there's anything that the voters are saying about the candidates there that make that state a little bit different.
Yeah, North Carolina, where we see a small Joe Biden lead, I'm going to take you inside there. And here again, we get tales of different regions once again. Everybody should get familiar, because we're going to watch this again on election night, with what they call the research triangle in and around Raleigh-Durham. That place reliably blue. Joe Biden needs big margins there. And then in and around Charlotte in our poll, he's doing okay. It's leaning towards Joe Biden. But these toss-up areas around the rest of the state are probably what's going to determine it. Can Joe Biden cut into what would have been in 2016 the president's margins in those other surrounding counties? And that's going to be one of the big keys for North Carolina. And there again, we're going to keep a careful eye on African-American turnout, among other things. So if I bring up that scenarios board again, and I look at African-American turnout, currently 22% in our poll, here again, watch what happens if that were to drop down to 19, we get a much tighter race. So there again is a story thread for you. One of the things we're watching, can Joe Biden motivate turnout among those parts of the Republican base? Can the president cut into that? And those small shifts that make the polls move a little bit and will make on election night these states fall one way or the other line.
Well, Anthony, before I let you go, I obviously have to ask, how is the Supreme Court nomination impacting this race?
A very good question, and a very topical one, obviously. Let me show you this from North Carolina and from Georgia. People who say they're very motivated to vote. Well, Democrats have told us that they think this makes the election even more important, as if it could get more important in the eyes of these voters. And we've got an even and very high numbers of people on both sides who say that they're motivated and that they're going to turn out. So it looks from the polling like this is something that has caught the attention of voters across the board. It has made people feel like the stakes are even higher than they already were. But really, we've got a very even race in terms of both sides telling us that they are going to vote, or in the case of North Carolina, for many, already have.
Wow, look at those numbers. This is going to be a squeaker, Anthony. We are in for a long election night, week, month, season. Anthony Salvanto, thank you.
Thank you.